Most of the days in Future Mobility Israel, we are working with the government, with the municipalities, how to solve the mobility problems. We are dealing with scooters, we are dealing with bus transportation, to bring Uber to Israel or not. All the things that government can do to solve the transportation problem, the way that people move from side to side. But we do not speak enough about moving goods. When you're talking about the road infrastructure and the railway infrastructure, that is limited. In Israel, the infrastructure of rail is for passenger and freight, not two systems. We are not talking about the goods enough. Even when we are talking about electrified cars, about autonomous, about connected car, we are talking in connection with people, not in connection of good, of cargo. But I'm sure that the cargo industry or the moving good industry has a revolution in the same time. You know, the numbers are in Israel, 25% from the kilometer travel using the roads is trucks, is moving goods. In some places in the world is less than that, but it's still a substantial number, and we want to understand how we can solve moving good problems and where the moving good issue or market is going to the future, to manage all of it together. I want to start that each one of you in the panel will present himself and say whatever he wants to say about the subject, and after that we'll ask some questions.
I lied about interrupting. Hold the mic. You can hold the mic like closer and point it at you, because we can't hear you in the audience. Like
it's very good, but now it's not my turn anymore. So let's start.
Yeah, so let me first thank you very much, the moderator, for the kind introduction. And you're absolutely right. I have collected a lot of titles in my life. All of them start with former. And one of my capacities was I was also the former CEO of the Austrian Railways. And when I'm talking to my Israeli friends, I always try to explain it with a few sentences what it is about, because you have every good reason to be super self-confident that Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the whole of Israel is really a laboratory for the future. And specifically if it comes to modern and innovative traffic solutions, which this is right. But on the other hand, if I have a look at the debates which we just were witnessing in the panel before, or seeing what's going on the streets here, specifically Tel Aviv, Jerusalem seems to be like a place from outer space. And I can tell you what I mean, because in my hometown in Vienna, nobody, definitely nobody would accept a traffic situation with the congestions which you have today here in Israel. And as a politician, you would be immediately voted out if you accept that kind of traffic jams. And when I'm talking about my former capacity as the Austrian railway boss, I'm always pointing at the fact that it's a company with 45,000 employees, which seems to be much, but you have quoted Russian Railways, which is a company with almost 1 million employees, so much bigger. But in my country, the railways is the biggest contributor to the GDP of all companies in Austria. And especially the influence on infrastructure investments is massive. So every year, 2.5 billion euros go into the railway system in new tracks, new stations, rolling stock, and so on. And that's also the reason why it contributes so massively also to the overall GDP development. And there is another point I would like to make. If you look at the debate in Europe about traffic systems of the future, you see that there were two big changes going on. The first one is a massive change of attitudes. Because in the generation of my parents, the car was the symbol of freedom, of autonomy, the symbol of social advancement. But today, if you go bumper to bumper, there is no sign of freedom and autonomy. It's gone. And if I look at my little daughter, a car will never be a status symbol for her. It's a journey. It's the latest sneaker model. It's perhaps the latest iPhone, but definitely not her car. And so there is a second attitude which is changing, which is climate change. There have been so much lip service about it, but now we have seen that climate change and the debate about climate change is really changing the political landscape. We have seen this in a lot of election campaigns in the last few months. And this has significant consequences for the whole transportation system, specifically also for cargo, because a lot of governments are pouring a lot of money in the railway systems, which means that you have to adapt, you have to increase capacities, you have to increase efficiency, and you have to increase customer experience. And that's the interesting observation, and then I will stop, which I made here in Israel, is although you have a very limited rail system, it's a really very small one, you have such great companies dealing with innovations on the rail side, cargo and passenger services. And I just want to mention, for example, a company which is called Silos. They have a box outside there, because all the improvements which a transportation and railway system needs are digital ones, if it's good or passenger transportation. And this makes the system more vulnerable. And Silos, for example, is the leader, the global leader in providing cybersecurity solutions for railways. So again, would like to come to my final point. So Israel really is a laboratory for the future, a laboratory even for the future of railways, although the presence here in the country is not as big as I would expect it. Thanks.
Yeah, I only will comment on that. Israel in railway, I've been the chairman of Israeli Railway. Israel 15 years ago, we haven't got almost no railway, 10 million passengers a year. Now we are 70 to 80 million passengers a year. We have to be 700 million in few years. So we have a huge gap of infrastructure. We are trying to gap it, but the issue here is how to use the technology revolution that happened in the infrastructure that we have to solve all the problem, to bring people out of car, but in the same time be much efficient in moving goods or cargo. So let's.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Shapiro. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Liberty Maritime Corporation and Liberty Global Logistics. I'm going to try and do something a little bit different, keep this a little interesting. If the AV people could try and put the slides up, I'm going to do this right from here, and I'll just say next slide. So first and foremost, I'm going to approach this from a maritime and logistics perspective. I'm going to specifically be talking about the technological revolution and the smart way of moving goods. It's my pleasure to be here at Smart Mobility. I really need to say a thank you to the Dock Innovation Center sitting in the front here. These people are incredible at affecting the smart shipping revolution that is occurring. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So, the next slide. Thanks. So big data. This morning we talked about, is big data as good as oil? No, big data is gold in shipping. Making smart decisions using and embracing data is just happening now in shipping. Next slide, please. We're going to do this in 60 seconds. That would be great. Thank you, sir. So, what's happening? We heard this morning we're just connecting with satellites. We've gone from the old dial-up AOL to constant connectivity just in the last couple of years. We now are connecting with real-time monitoring and sensors. We're beginning to analyze and learn about the data we possess in our ships in real time. We're using this for predictive analytics and maintenance. We're using this to optimize and innovate technologies that come along with our ships to measure our results for enhanced performance. So what does this really look like on a ship? So we can take data, We can make informed decisions. We can make smart decisions for safety avoidance. We can do optimization and voyage planning. We can manage our fleets by getting information. Which routes should we travel? How should we operate? We can look at our propulsion systems, our mechanical systems. We can also take this data and information to make smart and predictive maintenance decisions. And of course, we have now just recently gotten the capability through VSAT communications to do this from shore into the ships, connecting ship-to-shore satellite communication. Where are we moving? We're moving to try and catch up with all of you in the car industry towards autonomous technology. I'm not advocating for the elimination of mariners, but various insurance reports have shown that 70% of issues, collisions, and other items that happen on ships are a result of human error. Another 20% of issues that happen on ships are an act of indirect human error, which is a lack of maintenance. So by having autonomous systems and advancing our computer technology, we're going to reduce collisions, be able to optimize cargo loads, be able to move goods faster and smarter and more efficiently. Last, I'm going to turn from the ship side real quick in this introduction to the cargo side. Matchback. A matchback is also known as a street turn, or my understanding in Israel, for the maritime people in the room, this would be considered triangulation. So with matchbacks, we can save money for the stakeholders in the industry. We can also reduce carbon emissions, and we can reduce time and efficiency. So on the left-hand side of the technical solutions, we have the customers, and on the right-hand side, we have the utilization of equipment. Matchback systems is just one example of things being embraced here in Israel. And so we're going to see it in action in just a second, but Zim, the container line, is using matchback systems today for both environmental compliance and cost reduction. So let's take a quick look at matchback systems. So you can see on the right hand the system in action, triangulating and targeting customers, optimizing efficiency through Match Advisor, Match Marketplace, and Match Metrics. And so we have a lot of smart revolution that's just happening in shipping, and it is just beginning to take hold. A lot of the autonomous and advanced technologies you all have been developing for the car and automotive industry are now directly ready for crossover and innovation technologies that can be embraced by the shipping industry. For anyone local in Israel, I would encourage you to talk to the Dock Innovation Center about this. And the last thing I want to do before I hand the mic off is I just want to take a quick poll. How many of you in the room are involved in the automotive industry? Please raise your hand. Okay, I represent a company called Liberty Global Logistics. We're a major carrier of roll-on, roll-off cargo. While all of you are innovating for the automotive sector, we are the ones carrying it. 90% of all goods move by sea. Liberty Global Logistics is one of the major auto manufacturers' transportation suppliers around the world. So we are involved in transporting all the innovation that you all create. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gilad Zwebner. I'm head of the railway engineering infrastructure at Netivei Israel. Netivei Israel actually is the national transportation company for infrastructure in Israel. And for the past, in the past was building only roads in Israel until 10 years ago, when it was decided to start building infrastructure for railways. And today, most of our work is actually building the new infrastructure of the future railways of Israel. It started in the central of Israel and the north, but today we're actually promoting railways from Kiryat Shmona, from the northern border, till Elat, to the southern border, and to the Red Sea. And as we know, with infrastructure is it takes a lot of time to build it. Most of it is also to promote the plans and the design. And I think today, most of our problems is how to make our plans relevant for future uses. Because if we plan today for a system that will be built in 10 years, maybe in 10 years the technology won't be relevant. And we need to make our plans today relevant or very flexible for when it's going to be constructed, it's going to be still relevant for it. As we said about cargo and freight, most of our problem today in roads is that trucks actually cause the big problem with maintenance and congestion. As we said before, we have a high rate of trucks in the traffic. And building the new lines will actually will allow us to move a lot of the freight to the railway system and off the road and off also the passenger rail paths. Because if, as you said, we need to go from 30 million passengers a year to 700, we need a free time for passenger lines, trains. And for that, we're building actually the Eastern Corridor for all the freight trains. But I think there's also an issue, besides freight or cargo, we need to think about is what, if we passengers, we think about how to do the last mile for the passenger. Today, all the merchandise and buying, we're stuck buying at stores. In Israel, we still don't have Amazon, but in the United States, people don't go to stores anymore. They don't drive to the store to get what they need. They order it to the house. And then we need to think how we do the last 5 miles for the merchandise, how for the commerce to come to the people to the house. And this we need to think in the cities how to do it, because we don't want all the trucks going into the cities. And I think that's one of the major things we need to think ahead for the future.
So first question that I want to ask you all, we see the revolution or the mobility, technology revolution in shared mobility, in autonomous, in electrified car, in everything happening very quickly in the passenger side. I want each of you to speak how you see the influence of this revolution. You spoke about big data or stuff like that, but how do you see the revolution that happened usually in car, passenger, and traffic management and stuff like that? How do you see it in railway, in shipment, in your industries?
Yeah, I think if we would like to predict what's going on in the future, we need to some extent a very pragmatic approach and analysis. And I remember there was in the early 2000s, that was the Daimler Group who produced a new truck. And for advertising, they put a badge on the bumper, on the back bumper, which was saying, as long as we cannot send sausage by email, we have to share the road. And that's a funny statement. I think was created in the southern German development centers of Daimler because of the comparison. But I think what the industry has to do is it has to improve its basic services first and foremost. And for example, if you look at the rail industry, as I know, the Volkswagen Group spends every year $13 billion for research and development. That's almost twice as much as the whole OECD rail technology industry. And if you look at the value chain of railways, there is so much headroom for improvements: predictive maintenance, the dispatching services, command and control services, booking of tickets, for example. This is such a conservative industry that first and foremost, all the managers and executives in the industry has to improve the services. And there's a lot of activities going on. It's kind of a revolution. And of course, you will here have these integrated mobility as a service systems as well. But what I have acknowledged just recently, I'm not sure if you have seen the joint venture of BMW and Mercedes. It was really a big issue in Europe, not only in Europe, because it was traditional, long-standing rivals who said, okay, we are going to share our mobility as a service activities. And now, after the succession of the two CEOs, I think they have significantly reduced the pace, said, okay, our strategy is building cars and not offering services again. And what I believe is there will be a separation between the streams and the units, car manufacturers, and there will be a lot of headroom for new kind of services. But we will see a colorful mix of activities and not only having one answer.
Yeah, I think from a maritime perspective, I would divide this into two categories. We're seeing data exchange and transparency compress freight rates. We're seeing reduction in the cost per container. We're seeing economies of scale as vessels grow, using data from both new building design straight through to transportation and logistics systems to try and reduce freight to customers and indirectly reduce freight direct to consumers. And then I think the second category that we're seeing, the smart revolution and the information exchanges and the R&D, as well as the acceptance of environmental sustainability in shipping. Currently, if you were in the morning session, you've heard of something called IMO 2020. We have to burn 0.5% sulfur content fuel at sea. Fuel is the largest cost for every shipping company in the world. And our targeted goal by our regulator, the International Maritime Organization, is a zero-emission ship by 2050. And so we're seeing a lot of compression on freight rates and delivering goods cheaper, and we're also seeing a lot of regulatory compliance and environmental sustainability.
I think since we have a great lack of infrastructure, we also need to think how we manage our time using also the rails, but also the roads. We need to manage the times. Today we don't allow trucks to go into the cities at morning times or rush hour, but we need much more to think what times are the best for all goods to be moved from place to place. Because I'm coming from the infrastructure, so it's less relevant, the data, as you said, but it's still the management of using the time as best as we can is the most important thing.
So that's exactly the next question, maybe for you too. The infrastructure, we lack of infrastructure for sure. You are dealing with railway all the time, even you in the shipping industry do logistic into the land as well. And the big question is how could we use the infrastructure network better than today? Are there technologies, are regulator things that they have to do, maybe changes in the companies?
So I'll take a quick first stab. I mean, I think firstly, intermodal connectivity and intermodal cooperation for optimized load efficiency. And the quick example I would give you is the display I gave you of matchback systems. Finding a container, loaded, unloading it, and then reloading it again and sending it back to the port, as opposed to one container goes out fully loaded, becomes empty, goes back to the port, and we use a second container. So optimization and efficiency is going to allow us to use our infrastructure most efficiently.
Yeah, I absolutely share this opinion. What we see is due to the renaissance of the railways, there is significantly growing demand, and it's growing every year, specifically on the passenger side. And the consequence is, if you look at the railway system in Europe, it's almost 150, 175 years old. So you can't develop a new railway system till next week. It means a lot of investments, it means a lot of time, and it means a lot of planning efforts. And so the consequences, and the main question is, how can digital service contribute to a higher density on the tracks and to a better capacity usage on the platforms and in the trains? And that's exactly what's going on. And there, by the way, there are a lot of Israeli companies working in that field. That's really promising. On the other hand, I think we have to clearly state that specifically in Israel, there is a significant lack of investment in public infrastructure. And you can't correct these mistakes from the past within a short time frame. But I just can strongly recommend to do so, because the contribution to the overall GDP is in the initial phase immediately very high, and also in the long-term perspective, because it's an investment which you do, which is not for our generation, it's not for the next generation, but it will be for 10 more generations coming. So if there is a political agenda, I think it's really the time to have a look at it, because if you look at the transport figures, the CO2 emissions of trains, cargo trains in Europe are around 16 gram CO2 per ton kilometer, while on the road it's around 140. So there is an opportunity of massive improving the CO2 balance in a country like Israel.
Today we're building in Tel Aviv actually the mass transit rail, the light rail, and future maybe the metro will begin in a few years also. And all these systems we plan it for peak hours for people in the morning going to their work and later going back to their houses, but we have low peak times. And we need to think how to use it, because for, as I said before, the goods we need to put into the cities will go into actually to cars. And if we don't want them to cost, maybe to use our mass transit for for delivering goods during low times. Maybe between 10 and 2 in the morning, we can take one car of a light rail and just 2 packages to send them from the depot to the center of city. And from there to deliver, like today, Jolt, to people that by foot deliver to actually to the apartments, to people. We need to think again how to use it, the systems with much more flexibility today.
Do you think that the governments or the policy is the main driver here, or maybe the market itself know to make more efficiencies by using more technology, all the system that you can use to make your business more efficient, and maybe the market will solve it?
As far as railway companies are concerned, they are definitely very conservative companies, very slow movers, so you need to nudge them to speed up. That's for sure, but there is one specific aspect which is also accelerating the development. If you look at the demography of the railway companies in the Western world, you will see that there is an interesting demographic curve, which means that from 2022 on, you will see a massive resignment wave in the big railway companies. Just to give you an example, German Railways is looking in the next 5 years for hiring 100,000 people, and they are looking for skilled workers, and so therefore being in a fierce competition with industry for this kind of people. So what's going to be the answer? Increase by far the efficiency and to make it less staff intensive. And that's where the innovation on the digital side is chipping massively in. So it's not only about governmental politics, it's a demand and a requirement for the railways in the next few years. I think they are starting to understand it. So I'm helping some of your railway companies in connecting with European players. It always takes a while till they understand, but I think the times they are changing and the conditions are better than ever.
Well, I think from a regulation standpoint, the maritime industry, we're regulated internationally, as I said before, by the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and we're also regulated by the states and flags that we fly. So, for example, I have vessels that fly a U.S. flag, I'm regulated by the United States Coast Guard. If I have a vessel that flies a Marshall Islands flag, I'm regulated by that domiciled area. And they are quite effectively enforcing mainly environmental and sustainability regulations on us pretty stringently, and it's helping us drastically improve the efficiency of shipping and modal transport.
Well, since I'm coming from the government side, probably because I'm a government company, I think we can do much better so we can promote things much faster. So the market or the companies can adjust much more quickly than what we do today. That's for sure.
So let's speak a little about the future. What's your vision of what is going to happen with cargo, with moving goods? People talking about drones, maybe, I don't know, new system that not only use land infrastructure as always. I would like to hear the vision of the goods.
So I think most of the goods start at sea. 90% of world trade goes by sea. And what you're seeing is larger ships, larger economies of scale, which leads us to be more environmentally sustainable. You're going to add to that hub and spoke network more land-based distribution of larger shipments coming in, so we're polluting less at sea. And I think I would leave it to the railroads and the truckers to talk about the efficiency they're going to have there, or even the introduction of drone technologies once our ships arrive in port.
It's an interesting development because in Europe there are a lot of cities which were at the end of the 19th century really big centers of where people were living. And in some of these cities there was a strong lobby for horse carriages. And they missed to build railway stations, and the consequence was that we have seen the decline of all these cities. And so innovation in the transportation system is always heavily contested. And coming back to the microscooter stuff, which you have discussed discussed before. So I can tell you there is a lot of media coverage about Israel in the European media. So from Guardian to the German papers, Austrian papers. And of course, in these days, it's very much about the new government and the coalition talks you have. But there is a second item which is broadly covered in European media, which is the big danger of microscooters. And it's really funny to see because you're living in the fiercest neighborhood, but from the European point of view, seems that the biggest threat to Israel today is microscooters. So I'm so sorry for not being cynic, but that's really the truth. And so I think we are going to have a lot of fun. We will see really massive breakthrough innovations, and I'm very much looking forward curiously to the future of transportation in your country. Thanks.
Well, in Israel, as I said before, the future is actually going into the railways because our system was very small and it enlarges now very quickly. And I think that's a major change. We'll be here in about 5 years from today.
So thank you. I think that we can see that everybody is talking about scooters and Uber and Via and all those stuff, but this is a big portion of the transportation, all the freight, all the cargo, railway, ship. We will have to still invest a lot in infrastructure. Everybody believes that we have to do it, but use more and more technologies from everywhere, but from the mobility passengers revolution as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.